I'm trying something new. I'm using cinematic mode, which I normally don't like because to me it feels like using automatic on like a nice camera. But since I'm using my phone to film everything, I may as well test drive everything on it. I don't like that. I feel like it blurs you around the edges and it doesn't quite get the blurring right because it's not doing it the same way the normal camera would. So we'll see how I like this. But today's project is one that I've been wanting to do for like 2 years now. So, you know, maybe now's the moment. I just got a random source of motivation to do this. Here's what we're rocking. I have a very large blanket in my bedroom because I have a king size bed. I bought 2 king size duvet inserts and made like a bigger version by like cutting them up and sewing them together, and then made a custom cover for it. But in one of the king size duvets that I cut up, there was extra left over. And so I have 2 duvet inserts that are like the perfect lap blanket size. Here, I should show you what like the full size looks like. I don't like sewing, like I don't enjoy the process of it, and so I figured doing like a really simple quilt in a smaller size would be a great way for me to know, like, is this something I'm interested in? I think one of the first things I'll need to figure out is the color that I want it to be, because that's been a major struggle in the living room, is me trying to figure out color, because it was millennial pink and like a mid-tone blue when I first moved in. That was the first color theme that I went with. And then I bought this couch and it was gray, and I was sad because that's like the only color that I could get it in. Hi, baby. So I got a new couch, got chairs, made my rug, and everything was very beige and gray. Beige and gray. I don't like gray personally as a color, and so working around this couch is kind of a struggle. I'm a little mad at myself for getting a gray couch, but also it was kind of the only option. I didn't want one with a bright color. I wanted one that was gonna age well because I want to have it for a long time. And I wanted a white couch, but I have black cats and I have, you know, messy people come over every once in a while, and I don't want to be super precious about my couch all the time. And then I didn't want a black couch because that's not my style, and then black fabric, I feel like it just shows every little speck on it. So that left with the gray, which is much easier to maintain than any other color, really. And then I was devoid of color. I went from having a fair amount of color, I'll say, to having like no color. And then I overcorrected and added way too much color. And I've learned my lesson not to go to any extremes really aggressively, and instead I should just do what I want. All of that is just to say that I think I'm gonna go pretty basic on the color palette for this quilt. Don't hate me. Did I just sniff your face a little bit? Yes, I did. Okay, this one would not go well in here, but it is spectacular. Someone did a fantastic job on this. Oh, it looks so cool. I kind of like this one. I think they hand stitched over it, which is pretty fun, and I like that they did very obvious shown hand stitching, which I think is definitely a thing right now. I mean, it's been a thing for thousands of years. What am I saying? Okay, I'm liking this one. It's definitely really bold on the color palette, and I would probably mute down the color palette, but I do like the different lengths of like bars that they have in there. I'm just looking at my sewing Pinterest board and like, oh my gosh, I wish I liked sewing. I want to like sewing. I have this issue when I seek out inspiration where I think I seek out too much inspiration and I just want more ideas, and it's never like enough is enough. Let's make a quilt. Okay, I have a story time for you. It is relevant, I promise. So yesterday I was driving to work and I popped a tire on my car, and I was so lucky because right away there was a turnoff that led to an apartment parking lot that was like really quiet and chill. Perfect place to check it out. It had been a solid 10 years since I had replaced a tire, and it was not nearly as hard as I remember, albeit last time I popped a tire was very shortly after getting my driver's license, and it was like negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit out at midnight. So that was not fun. This time it was like a lovely spring day. Anyway, so I texted my husband immediately to let him know what happened, and lucky for me, he works just 10 minutes away from where I popped my tire, so he headed over, and in the meantime I took off the tire and started putting on the spare, and then by the time he got there he was like helping me just finish up, and the spare was so nasty and old, like worse for wears for sure. And we were again lucky because we were less than 0.3 miles away from a discount tire store that was having a Memorial Day sale. And these tires are super old and have needed to be replaced for a long time. We've just been driving them to death. They said it would take them an hour and a half to change out the tires, so we just took the other car together, and this was in the middle of the workday, so we just decided to take a long lunch essentially and drove to Jo-Ann Fabrics because that was really close and there wasn't a lot of like entertaining stuff to do nearby. So we went to Jo-Ann Fabrics and I was like, you know what, I've been looking for fabric for such a long time. I should just buy some for this project or I'm never gonna get it done. So at Jo-Ann's, I picked out the fabric that I wanted, and it was really fun kind of looking at fabrics that my husband liked because there were some really cute ones. He showed me this crab one that I have no use for, but I love and I wanted to get it. But oh my gosh, the self-control was real that day. It helped that I knew that I had to spend over $400 on a new set of tires. And when we went up to the cutting counter so that they could cut my fabric, there was another person working there that was having the hardest time fixing their pricing gun. Like the labels just weren't loading properly. The lady was so frustrated. She just kind of like threw it down at the counter and was like, oh, if anyone can fix it, let me know. And my husband was like, I like puzzles. So he went over while I was getting my fabric cut, and then when I was done getting my fabric cut, I went over too, and him and I worked on fixing their pricing guns, and we were just talking to the ladies and like having a great time. So my husband figured out the first couple steps and I figured out the last couple steps, and together we fixed all of the pricing guns that they had, and it was so fun. They were so sweet and thankful. So then we went up to pay for the fabric at the register, and one of the ladies from the cutting counter went up to the register as well and told the cashier like, hey, these people fixed all of our pricing guns. Can you give them a discount? So the fabric was already on sale, and then they just gave us some extra money off. It was so sweet. And then we went to a Japanese restaurant and got some good lunch and went, and our tires were fixed. It was the best case scenario for popping a tire. So between popping the tire and getting all new tires on took like less than 2 hours, and then we both went to work after that. So 10 out of 10 tire popping experience, really. I just love that my husband does not have social anxiety like I do, because the lady that was having the issue with the pricing gun, I never would have gone up to her because I would have been so nervous to talk to a stranger. But he didn't even think about it for a second. He was like, oh my gosh, someone wants my help? I am here. The amount of strangers he just walks up to and helps is insane, and I love it. Anyways, that's probably one of the best parts about being married to him, is just getting into these weird, wholesome adventures all the time. Stuff like this is always happening with him. That was it. That was my story time. Do you want to see the fabric that I got? So the colors I got is sort of a off-white cream color and then a really dark espresso brown, so it can kind of read as black and white, but it's not quite as contrasting as that because I don't love really stark bright white and black in the color palette of my home. I prefer off-whites and browns as opposed to black. So these will be for the patchwork quilt portion of the duvet cover. And then I don't think I'm going to use it for this project, but I also got this fabric. The next step for me is going to be throwing these in the washer. I know mentally that you are supposed to wash fabric before you use it, and it's especially important when doing quilting. I've never done that before sewing, but I want to do this right because this is going to be my first introduction into trying to enjoy sewing and trying to execute it right. And I want to take my time and not rush through it like I do with all my other sewing projects that I end up hating. Should I dry them too? Like, should I put them in the dryer? I feel like I should, just because they might shrink. Because if they're going to shrink, these are 100% cotton, by the way. If they're going to shrink, I kind of want them to do that before I like actually sew the item. I'm going to look that up, but I feel like I should put them in the dryer instead of air drying them this time. Fabric has been fully prepped, and by that I mean washed and dried. Think I'm ready to cut. I even broke out my nice scissors. I waited until I was responsible enough to actually own nice scissors, and when I finally bought these, I think my main takeaway since has been I'm not responsible enough to own these. It took me 20 minutes to find where I set these down last. So I think I should just like mark up and cut these. I should iron this, shouldn't I? Doobie doobie dooba doobie doobie dooba agent steam. Now's probably a good time to mention how I came up with the design that I think I'm going to be doing. I was having a really tough time really envisioning what I wanted, and so what I ended up doing is taking a picture of each of the fabrics that I picked out, bringing those images into Canva, and then messing around with those so I could make it really look like the quilt with the same colors. And that way I could just play around with different shapes and sizes and pattern ideas. I came up with a couple options that I really liked, but there was one that I just loved the most, and so I think I'm going to be going forward with that one. And today my only goal is really to cut fabric. I'm not planning on actually sewing anything today. I'm really just trying to be mindful of doing this slowly and steadily in small chunks, because it's not very common anymore that I sit down and knit for 4 hours. So why would I expect myself to sit down and sew for 4 hours? Math-wise, this really worked out. So every square or rectangle or whatever I cut out, it needs to have one dimension be 3 inches. And because I want a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all sides, for the squares, I'm cutting it out 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches so that I have 3 inches and then 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side. Of course, it's sewing and it's me, and so I'm going to measure it 18 times before cutting and make sure I do everything right, and nothing's going to be the right size. So all I can do right now is try my best. Do you like my mini iron? I got it in college because I couldn't fit a full-size iron in my dorm room. And at this point, I just can't be bothered to get a big one because this works good enough and I don't do a lot of sewing right now. I have a question for the sewists watching right now. So I was watching a video where someone was sewing, and this person, when they were finished sewing like a line, they cut the thread and they like pulled it through on one end and tied it in a knot, kind of like I would do with knitting. Is that something I should be doing? I mean, it seems like a lot of effort, but is it like a necessary step that I've just been missing this whole time? Another question for the people out there that actually enjoy sewing: what tips would you have for someone to enjoy it more? So not necessarily doing it better or working harder, but like, how do you enjoy it? Like, in what way do you engage with sewing that makes you really excited to do it? With this project, I'm making a point to make do with what I have and not buy anything new aside from the fabric. This whole project is essentially a test drive for a much larger project I have in mind. Squares are cut. I should have enough to do 2 rows. And I think that's the way I'm just going to envision this project, is just 1 row at a time, because that's a much more achievable goal. Like in a day, I can sew a single row. That is doable. I'm gonna start sewing. I have my squares cut, and so I think just sewing them together is the next step. This will be my first time trying this technique, but I want to do the thing where, I think it's called chain sewing. I've heard different names for it, but you like sew your thing, send it through, and normally I would cut the thread, but instead you just like go right into the next thing and just keep doing that like a little assembly line. It's meant to be faster. I've never done it before, so we'll see if it actually is. So I think when I reach the end of one, I just pull it a little bit and then start the next one. I like this technique. This is so much faster. Oh my gosh. No! Stupid bobbin. Ugh. Oh my god. This is why sewing. This is why everyone hates it. Yes, I have recently cleaned and lubricated my machine and dusted it, and I'm using a new fresh needle, and it's the right kind of needle. Por favor, funciona. Tell me, why are sewing machines so difficult? Tell me why I'm doing everything right, I think. Tell me why I never want to sew again when my thread breaks in a weird way. This is it. I've identified it. This is the feeling of frustration of why I don't like sewing. When the machine does this every 10 seconds, that kind of takes the joy out of it. And like, I don't want to blame the machine because I got a nice machine. Like, it's cool. It's just frustrating. I need a live-in sewing machine technician so that when stuff happens, I can just abandon it and someone else can take care of it for me. I have my first strip. Is this really the width that I need it to be? I think I should limit myself to like a maximum of 2 hours of sewing in a day, because beyond that, I can see that's where the frustration may come in. It really smells like cat poop. You're safe on the other side of the screen. It's not fair. At this point, I feel like what I should do, hi baby girl, is sew all the strips. We're gonna put the needle down so you don't stab yourself actually. And turn it off. Sewing machine safety. I think at this point what makes sense for me is to sew all the strips, and then I will check in with you once I've done that, and we are going to sew the strips together. I'm gonna press the seams as well so that they lay flat instead of sticking straight out. I don't know a lot about quilting, but I know that someone's gonna tell me that I'm wrong and I'm doing it wrong, and my reality is gonna crumble.
Ay, amor, te quiero dar mis días, también darte mis noches llenas de amor.
I have all my fabric strips pressed and ready to go, and I think I'm just gonna sew them together and hope for the best. I'm already accepting the fact that they're not gonna line up, and that's okay. I also have these in a total random order because I have different sizes. So like I have squares and I have these like half squares and like longer ones. I'm just gonna mix them up and make it kind of random, and I think that'll breed the best result as opposed to me just methodically finding the best assortment that looks effortless and unplanned. I'm hoping I can get this all done in one sitting, but I also don't know how long it's gonna take. Yeah. Okay, so I have finished the front of the cover, which is like so exciting, and I'm really just hoping that the hard part is over. So next steps for me is going to be adding a tie closure, because with duvets, there's lots of different closure options. There are zippers, which I don't really like because I feel like it cheapens it almost. And then there's button closures, which I don't like because it's like a hard thing, like that's sensory. I'm not into that. And then there's tie closures, which happen to be the easiest to make, and they're also my favorite, like aesthetically. And I'm gonna add tie closures on this end, the short end. Another thing I want to do is adding ties to the corners because I want to be able to tie the corner of the inserts to the corner of the cover. And beyond that, I think the only other step is to add the backing to it. I can see the finish line, so I'm gonna do those little finishing things, and next time I talk to you, this will be done. I really wanted to come out here and tell you that I felt so good about this whole process and there was nothing but good feelings, but that wouldn't be honest. So here's the truth. As I was sewing the squares together, I was overwhelmed with self-doubt, thinking I'm not doing this right, I don't know what to do, should I just stop because I'm clearly not doing this correctly? As I was sewing the strips together, I was not having a good time either because I felt like a failure since the rows did not line up at all. And it sounds silly to say out loud, but I know you felt this too. If you're watching this, then you are a maker, crafter, creator. You felt this before. At one point, I was surprised that I felt embarrassment. I knew I'd have to share whatever I made, and I was afraid that people were going to see what I try to keep very close to the vest, which is that I don't know what I'm doing. I get comments on occasion of people saying, I want to make videos too, but I'm not confident enough. I'd love to knit a sweater, but I could never. And so here's a note to myself. Confidence can't sew a duvet cover. Confidence can't knit a sweater. It's darkly comical that I was embarrassed about how my rows didn't line up, because if I just let that feeling control my decisions, I'd be doing myself a great disservice. So I'm going to intentionally make a point to sew another quilt and learn a little more. And I'm going to accept that I will never, ever meet my own standards. It's just not possible. No one's coming up to it with a ruler, picking out the fact that the rows didn't line up. In fact, no one else is going to notice unless they're an active quilter. I love the feeling of the fabric. Something about inexpensive cotton has this like crinkly quality to it that I just love from a sensory perspective. It really reminds me of this brown duvet cover my mom made for my older sister when we were little. I can also say with a fair amount of honesty that I love the end result and I will not be picking it apart for flaws in the future. I will, however, be picking all the loose threads off of it because, as you may have seen in some of these clips, the loose threads have really made their home on this blanket. Not only would I make this again, I've already purchased the fabric to do this again. So if you'd like to see my second attempt at sewing a duvet cover, let me know. This next one is going to be so much bigger and far more colorful, and I would love to share it with you.